a very, very commentary.
I want to just say thank you and welcome to the program. And I am just obviously so thrilled to have Kim Witczak um, in my studio and with me. So thank you very much. And I just want to say that before we get into it, that you have become a patient advocate and very much kind of taking on a lot of big pharma and trying to change the way that we as patients and consumers see medicine. And I know you have, this came upon, you call yourself the accidental advocate. So I know you've had some very tragic experience because of what happened to your husband. Can you explain that or go into that of how you
Sure.
became this accidental advocate?
Sure. Well, I like to say, as you called me, the accidental advocate, because I never chose to do this work. And sometimes, as I say, our greatest purposes choose us. And so I really got into it because it was personal. I had, back 20, it's hard to think that it's been over almost 22 years, but I was happily married to my husband of almost 10 years. We both had like successful careers. We were talking about having a family. Like he was my best friend. I mean, I basically had my life already like scripted out, right? This is what you do. You find your, I mean, I literally had it like everything that I wanted.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and so, however, on August 2003, I literally got a call that changed the trajectory of my life. And so, for any of your listeners who've ever gotten the call, as I call it, or, the call that literally changes everything. And my call happened when I hadn't heard from my husband all day. So I'm like, hey, Dad, do me a favor. Wood's been having trouble sleeping. Can you go over and just check and see if you can find him? My dad goes to my house. My parents lived a couple miles away, goes over there. And I'm still in the studio shooting. It's like 9 o'clock at night, and I get a call. It's bad. It's bad. And I'm like, what do you mean it's bad? He's like, Woody's dead. And I'm like, what? What do you mean, Woody? I'm like, what do you mean Woody's dead? What do you mean Woody's dead? And he goes, and I go, how do you know he's dead? How do you know he's dead? And I'm like screaming, and because I'm trying to get my head around those words.
How can
He's
you
dead.
process that?
Yeah, like yeah, like he's dead. I'm like, what? Like it was just like boom, a train hit me. And I go, how do you know he's dead? He goes, he's hanging. I'm like, what? Like it was because Woody wasn't depressed. Like Woody had no history of depression, nothing. And so like hearing those words, he's hanging, like the guy, like I just left out of town. Like if
Oh my
I thought
God.
this was the way it was gonna all end. And Woody, like 5 weeks earlier, had just went to the doctor because he was having trouble sleeping. And Woody was a guy, he was a big athlete, and he was a guy that always, and he also needed 8 hours of sleep. Like if you didn't have 8 hours of sleep, he didn't care if you were at a dinner party, he'd fall asleep. So he's
Oh
a guy
wow.
that always had 8 hours of sleep. And he went to his doctor who he trusted, who basically has fixed him from like broken legs, stitches in his, head from like sports. And the doctor gave him a 3-week sample pack of an antidepressant Zoloft and said it would take the edge off and help him sleep.
Which
And
is an SSRI.
yep, which is an SSRI, an antidepressant. And I happened to be out because it was my busy time of my year work wise, and I was down in New Zealand on a shoot. So literally, I left the day before. I was gone for 3 weeks. I was gone the full 3 weeks. He had the sample pack that automatically doubled the dose. So nobody's watching him. Nobody's there. The sample pack that he got was 25 milligrams, and then on for week 1 and week 2, it went to 50 milligrams. And
Nice.
so, and so it automatically doubled it. And it's interesting because a lot of times people will say that's a low dose of Zoloft, but for Woody, it was enough to kill him. But right before, so I was gone those first 3 weeks. I'm excited to see him. I'll never forget something that still sticks with me, and I'll close the loop from the night that Woody was found. But I walked through I was waiting for Woody to come home from work, and he's completely drenched in his blue dress shirt. and he was crying. He dropped his bag at the back door, fell into a fetal position on our floor in our kitchen in front of our dishwasher, and he kept going, Kim, you gotta help me. I don't know what's happening to me. My head's outside my body. Kim, I don't know if I can handle this. You gotta help me. And he's bawling. I was like,
Oh my God.
like, literally have never in our like 10 years of being married, I've never seen this. And we calmed him down. We prayed. We did breathing, and he calls his doctor, and the doctor said, you got to give the drug 4 to 6 weeks to kick in. And Woody was on the drug 5 weeks.
Oh my God in heaven.
Yeah. And it
And you know,
literally never even questioned it. But the night that Woody was found, and I'm in Detroit trying to figure out, like, how am I even getting home? The coroner got on the phone and asked me a question. Was Woody taking any medication? And the only medication he had in his system was that he even had, was he was taking, was Zoloft. And she told us, I'm going to proceed. She said, I'm going to take this bottle with us. It might have something to do with his death. And so that was a clue. And the other clue that night, because he left no note, the other clue was the front page of our newspaper had an article that said the UK finds link between antidepressants and suicide in teens.
I mean, first of all, just let me say that my heart goes out to you. That is just like, that is so beyond tragic. I just can't even imagine what you went through. And then to find out that it was something that he was taking that precipitated this, or and you know, it's many drugs are probably all these drugs that some of them obviously help people. There's no question. And I'm not coming down on all you know, drugs that work for people, that people need them. But it's these side effects that are in the smallest of print, that are not told to people, like really flat out give when they're prescribed for people, they're not told this could possibly be a side effect. You need to watch out for this and watch out for these signs, because they advertise them on television while you're watching the news. All of these pharmaceutical companies, like they're passing out candy.
Yep.
So to know that he took something that was supposed to help him and to be prescribed that for sleep. Well, how
Yeah.
did that come about?
Well, that's the thing that I've come to realize because, at the time, even when Woody had this head outside the body, I mean, I wish I would have known what to look for, right? Woody knew nothing. He was, he just trusted, came home with, he didn't have any paperwork. There were no warnings back then, number one, on these drugs. And also that he had, like, he got an antidepressant. He didn't even know to ask the question, um, you know, that this is an antidepressant. He might have said, well, I'm not depressed, right? But
Hmm.
what they were doing back then is what I've learned is that drug companies, they'll use, once a drug's on the market, they can use it a doctor can prescribe it any way they want. And if there's, I'm sure they were thinking, oh, this will help take the edge off. Maybe there's some new work anxiety. It'll help, to help you sleep. So I'm sure that's the thought process because of the way that they were advertising and also going into, because remember at this time in 2003, Zoloft was pretty new on the market. But I had no idea at the time, like we didn't question when Woody was head outside the body. I remember saying, oh, well, why don't you quit your job? Like, if this is too stressful, like, of course, this wasn't a stress thing, like if your job, your new, startup company. And I wish we didn't know what to look for. We didn't have any of that information. But the night that Woody was found, my brother-in-law went home and Googled Zoloft and suicide. We had no idea that in 1991, there were FDA hearings on the emergence of violence and suicide with Prozac. And there were big hearings, and I would encourage any of your listeners, and I'm by no means, and I say this all the time, I'm not anti-drug. I'm pro-information. Exactly what you said. For some people, they may work, but for others, they harm. And when you don't know the information, you are the one that is kind of. And what I've learned in these 22 years is that harms are not something that we talk about. It's about get the drugs, on the market. We want to talk about, you know,
Well, it's really interesting. My mother, God rest her soul, passed away in a elective surgery. Was told it was minimally invasive, and she was 81 years old. The doctor accidentally cut her right coronary artery and killed her. She walked in wheeling my dad in his wheelchair, and never came out. And he touted this operation as the safest way because it's minimally invasive. He couldn't see, the field of vision wasn't large enough for him. She should have had a sternotomy where he could have seen what he was doing. And never did we ever think that there was a chance she wasn't going to live. It was a pretty routine um, operation. But I'm saying that is because my mother was also, the only other thing my mother had wrong with her was she had irritable bowel syndrome. And she had a leaky valve, which they were fixing, elective, but she had irritable bowel syndrome for many years. They prescribed her Celexa. Celexa is an SSRI. So they use these off label. They use those SSRIs for other reasons. I've also known someone who had it for weight loss. They were prescribed an SSRI. So it's interesting how they just prescribe them for all different kinds of reasons. Insomnia, they're really an antidepressant.
yeah. And it's really, I mean, that is a good point with the antidepressants. I have met so many, unfortunately, I've met so many people over the years who's like back in the day when we were trying to get, because that became our mission was to get warnings added to these drugs. But I met families whose kids were given the antidepressants for test anxiety. Now that's, I mean, that's a normal, every, like little kids test anxiety. They moved from another city. So they had like, they were nervous moving from one state to another state. They went on, little kids, 12 and 13 years old, and they're like, I'm still friends with the family, who went on and hung themselves. That is
No.
normal for little kids. And so that was all during this time. And they were, I mean, I've heard it for like, now I'm hearing all these like middle-aged women, like my age, that are getting it for like for hot flashes
I
and
read about that.
hormonal. Yeah, so like again, I think we put so much, like your mom, and like, and which by the way, I'm really sorry to hear, because I guarantee you, I mean, when she went in, it was safe, right? And
Yeah.
you never thought anything of it. You didn't think you were not going to see your mom again. And here it
No, my
was.
mom was, but it was like a car accident. We thought we'd see her, and I was with her that morning. She brought all of her books to read. She had never been in the hospital other than to have a baby, never had surgery her whole life. And her mother lived to 104. The last thing the doctor said to her, I was in the pre-op, he said, "We're going to have you live to 110." And because she
Wow.
was so healthy. And then he comes out 6 hours later and he said, "I don't think we're going to win this one today, folks." We were like, "What?" Like it was like we're at a ball game, it's like, and obviously we it was in a state of Ohio, and we did bring a lawsuit against, which we settled, but you know, for wrongful death. But the truth is people are not educated on medications, on even these minimally invasive. Minimally invasive sounds like, wow, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It's the same. It actually is, in my mother's case, was a bigger deal.
What I have learned in this whole thing, nobody really wants to talk about harms, right? I now it's interesting. I sit on that FDA advisory committee that in 91 didn't do their job, right? That if somebody, but all of those members, almost every one of those members took money from pharmaceutical companies that were making antidepressants. So they're like, nope, we don't see any issue, right? We'll look the other way. And I think what I've come to realize, like even Mary's mom, like unfortunately, sometimes like there's always gonna, what I've learned is there's always gonna be a small percent of people that are gonna be hurt by products, right? And it's just considered acceptable collateral damage. Even the way they look at clinical trials. Now, one of the things that I didn't realize that I learned is all the clinical trials that come on to get a drug on the market, all the information? The FDA does. They're no, the or not the FDA, the drug companies. It's their monies, it's their trials, they design it, they control it, and the whole goal is to get a product on the market. And so I have come to believe that, and I think it's what I always say, my patient safety advocates actually get mad when I say this. I go, you know what? We're customers, and it's a business. It's a huge, huge business. And I don't know that people intentionally go out to hurt somebody, right? I don't think that. I mean, I think there are some that, I do think there are some that know that, that some people might get harmed, but I don't think it's intentional for a lot of people. I think it's just they don't really put that number. Like if somebody gets harmed, like it's always seen as a number, like, oh, even in the clinical trials, oh, there's X amount of people or percentage of that withdrew from the trial or had to be that maybe got killed. But what they don't realize, these are somebody's mother. There's somebody's husband, there's somebody's kid. Like, and so I was always like, until we start remembering that the pharmaceutical companies are beholden to their shareholders.
Yeah.
It is a business. I mean, of course, they make products. And what I also think has happened is we've been ingrained, and I say we, the general public, we've been ingrained like, oh, they're doctors. We put them on pedestals. They're smarter than us. They know our bodies. So I believe that we have given our power away blindly because we've just trusted, right? They know
Kim, I
better.
was going to say that because that is so true. And you saying, advocate for yourself, advocate for your loved ones, because that is something that I've been doing a lot. Like I sit and go through, my father's on like 20 different medications. I want to get him off of medications, described. He's got too many. He's 86 years old. He's got prostate cancer, but they keep giving him more and more and more. I'm like, Dad, you're on 3 things for blood pressure. Why are you on 3? So I'm always in touch with his GP going, why is he on all this? He should not be, the least medication, the better. And so I think people do that. They look at their doctor like their doctor is the end all be all, knows everything. And a lot of people are not like us. They don't question. I think most people don't. They're like, oh, well, my doctor told me to take this, so I'm just taking it. They don't look it up. They don't question it. They don't look for the answer to what are the side effects of these? How harmful can they possibly be? So, I mean, educating the public is so important because don't just, I mean, you have to take your health into your own hands to a certain degree. And then those of maybe your elderly parents or aunts and uncles and people that don't really know how to look things up and to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. Were you like this before, or what did it take your mom until you had some other things that happened that you started? I mean, I wasn't. I blindly trusted, right?
I never did just because we have medical backgrounds in our family. And I started out in pre-med and didn't end up in
um,
pre-med, but I've always had a real interest in medicine. So I've kind of been a little bit leery and cynical of the medical profession for a while. And I always liked to read my own charts and read my blood work and kind of figure it all out. But having said that, it accelerated when that happened to my mother. Now, when that happened to my mother, I'm like, that's it. Like now I'm just completely, you know, balls to the walls on it all because
yeah.
it's unbelievable how people just listen and they don't know and it's sad because and then they see commercials. Like my father even looks at commercials and he'll go, "Oh, they've got something new for prostate cancer. I saw it on Fox News or whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, Dad, I'll look into it for you." But, and that's just for what he's got, but I'm sure a lot of people how about Ozempic? What about
Oh,
Ozempic?
oh, I think I'm like super worried about that because I've been studying the business side, right? So my background is in advertising and marketing. So I understand the marketing game. And so it's a very interesting, and I also like, because a lot of times when we would take on new clients, we had to go do what we called a 360-degree review. So that meant we had to go in and totally understand whatever our client's business was, who their competition was, and the good, the bad, the ugly. So we naturally would go in and like dig deep, right?
Yeah.
And so with one of the things that I always like to do is follow trends. Well, every January out in San Francisco is something called the JP Morgan Health Conference. And JP Morgan's a big, financial,
Hmm.
and it's all about the healthcare and what's going to be the latest, greatest. Well, last year, it was the first time after the pandemic, they're getting together live, and there was a whole thing on the two big areas of growth and opportunity, like billions of dollars of opportunity for the companies, because this isn't for you and I, this is for the healthcare companies. The two categories: weight loss, obesity, and Alzheimer. And what are we seeing? All the new drugs that are coming on for those two, and everybody's trying to get into the obesity game or the Alzheimer game of like supporting drugs, etc., because it's a big business and
It's a
market.
massive business. And
Yeah.
I was just, I've been interested in peptides for a while. So I've been kind of doing a deep dive on peptides, which are naturally made in the body. They're not approved by the FDA because they haven't done these massive trials on them. But Ozempic is a peptide. They figured out a way of making, because they naturally occur in your body, and peptides are so wonderful. They're finding out for years now they're so wonderful for you, but the FDA can't approve them. Same as bioidenticals.
Mhm.
They're not pharmaceutical grade, so they can't approve them. But they figured out how to do it with Ozempic. It is a peptide, but it's the only one FDA approved because they can now advertise it as for weight loss.
Yeah.
So
And what I'm really worried about is, so one of the things that I discovered through all of this is I too I had a wrongful death, failure to warn lawsuit against Pfizer. And I mean, obviously, you know what that whole situation is.
mm,
In this whole thing, I realized that they all put monies aside, knowing that the companies, that there's going to be future litigation, and then they're going to fight like hell so that you can't sue them. So there's a whole game of just the
oh
legal
yeah,
system keeping you out of it, right? But the Ozempic, the reinsurance agents have already told the companies to set aside a bulk of their profits, just so, that they're still making money. They're making a lot of money, which is almost this idea of, I say, make hay when the sun shines, because
yeah.
might as well make, well, everybody's asking for it, but we don't know long-term benefits, and we're already seeing issues that the companies, there will be major lawsuits. I think this is going to be another huge disaster eventually, when long term, because we don't know what the long term is. And that's the other thing with a lot of the drugs and new drugs coming to market. I always say wait until it's on the market for at least 7 years. That's what we've been taught, is to make sure, because a lot of times the clinical trials are coming to, they're small, like antidepressants. The antidepressants that brought the drugs onto the market were only 6 to 8 weeks, but people are on them for decades. And I had something where I had to go get an endoscope, and I'd never had one, but it turned out it was from long-term use of Excedrin that burnt a hole, and I had like low
Oh my,
hemoglobin. Yeah, it was a horrible. But anyways, I was getting ready, which I know better, but I'm getting ready to have this procedure, an endoscope, where they go down,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
your throat. And I kept asking the doctor all these questions, like, just basically asking him questions, like, and then finally he looked at me and he goes, "Do you know how many of these I do every single week?" And I looked at him and I was like, this is where I think for people, we get to stand up, but so many people are afraid to stand up. But I was like insulted when he said that to me. And I looked at him and I go, "Do you know how many I've had in my body? None. This is the first thing, and you're putting that in my body. I'm not questioning your ego or like, are you good at
Yeah,
what you're doing? I'm just like, can't you tell I'm scared? Like, that's the reality.
unbelievable.
And he did not, in his mind, he thought I was questioning his, like, ability. He's like one of the best endoscope people or whatever they're called. And I was like, no, it's just like you're putting that in my body, and I have every right, and I think all of us have every right to ask any question that they want, because it, at the end of the day, like, it's your body. And just like after Woody died, I went to the doctor, and remember, there were no warnings then, right? And of course, people are like, oh, he killed himself. So, they all, like, they're thinking, oh, he must have been depressed or whatever. But I went to the doctor, my doctor, and she goes, do you think you need something? And I looked at her and I'm like, well, I think it's the drug that killed my husband. I go, but my husband died. Aren't I supposed to hurt? And
Yeah,
she
that's a good
said,
point. Aren't
yeah.
I supposed to
And
hurt?
aren't I supposed to hurt? And she said, but you don't need to. And they were, and that, I think, right there
Wow.
is this idea that I think we as humans and as people, we've also kind of like, I don't want to hurt. Are you kidding me? I wanted to rip my heart out. You know what that grief's like. I wanted
Yeah.
to scratch it
Were they
out.
just, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to feel it, but ultimately at the end of the day, that pill's not, and I remember saying to her, that pill's never going to bring Woody back. And so I need to feel it. And
Because
so
what those pills can do is make you almost flatlining,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
you're not, yeah. Like you
yeah,
don't have a high, you don't have a low, you're just somewhere in between.
yeah.
And then how long do you have to stay on them? And when you go off of them, then there's a withdrawal from that. And then when you do go off of them, are you having to deal with what you stopped dealing with? And all of a sudden the gates open up and there's the flood starts? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you just said, because what you resist persists, right? So we can all numb whatever, but ultimately it's, you can't, like, these are things that we have to, like, almost in some ways kind of push back or think like, wait, maybe all these are opportunities for, like, we're supposed to hurt, we're supposed to feel, we're supposed, that's how you heal, is by feeling and not flatline. I remember meeting back in the 2006, it was going to be for the adult hearings for antidepressants, and there was this documentary filmmaker that contacted me, and because he was trying to record, he was filming himself trying to get off of Paxil, and it all started with one premise. His mom died, and his baby was born within a week apart of each other, and those are very different
wow.
emotional experiences. And he said, I felt nothing. He goes, I felt nothing. I didn't feel happy, I didn't feel sad, I felt nothing. And so then he started going, wait a minute, when did I, is it my drug maybe, right? And so then he started going back, when did he get put on Paxil? Like, so then it became that curiosity of like, oh wait, maybe it's the drug. And so he went back to all the way 10, 12 years earlier, when he had a major breakup with a girlfriend that's not his wife, but he's been on the drug for all these years. And so now he's trying to get off of them. But and it was that whole idea of feeling nothing, and if he didn't feel nothing, but I don't know that life is, so I think this is where we have to also, like, as patients, is really kind of sit back and really ask ourselves, like, I mean, of course, everybody, nobody wants to hurt. Like, I don't want to, if you want to go like lose weight, it's a lot easier to
Yeah.
take a pill, but you have to go to the gym, right? Or you have to, like, you're sad, you got to, like, you might have to feel and not be numb. And so I don't know, there's so many things that I've learned in these 22 years, and I wish I didn't have to learn, but I love audience, like, I love that you're having this conversation, because I don't think we think about it, and for a lot of people they don't think about it until it's too late.
Well, I was just going to read something off of this paper that I have here about SSRIs um, there's a problem with sexual dysfunction. That's a massive problem with them that I don't think, and a lot of teens are being prescribed these, and college students. Increased risk of suicidality in young adults. Research indicates that individuals under 25 may experience an elevated risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors when taking antidepressants. Withdrawal symptoms, 43% of patients experience withdrawal symptoms such as dizziness, anxiety, and flu. Emotional blunting. That's what we were talking, emotional blunting.
Yeah.
Some users report feeling emotional numbness, reduced emotional sensitivities, affecting their overall quality of life, and cognitive decline.
But like everything that you just said right there. So withdrawal is a huge problem, and people need to know this. Like if they're getting put on them, that I always say, if you decide you want to go on them, you better have all your information, but you also better have an exit plan. Like ask your doctor how long, because some people can't get off. Like this guy who had been on it for 12 years, he couldn't get off, so he ended up having to go on a really really low dose of another type of
I
antidepressant.
haven't heard of that drug Paxil for a long time. I remember that. It's a mood stabilizer, right? Or what is the
Well,
Paxil?
Paxil is an antidepressant. It's an SSRI,
Okay,
but
same like an SSRI,
it gets used for all of that, right? And
but
the
it's
other
an
one,
older drug, right? Isn't that drug's been around for a while?
it's kind of in the same class of Zoloft and
Yeah.
Paxil and Prozac. Yeah, so it's been around, but so that, and the one that also, like you just brought up a really big one, the sexual dysfunction,
Massive. Yeah.
called post SSRI sexual dysfunction, PSSD. Well, that still, there's lawsuits because there's been to try to get the FDA to put that on the warnings. It's not on the warnings. Other countries warn, but this is not a conversation that we're having with people who are like going to go on these meds. I can pretty much assure you that if you actually, in some ways, I don't think anybody ever really thinks you're going to go kill yourself, right? Like if you're getting
Yeah.
it for,
Yeah.
well, you know, like if you said, oh, you might kill yourself, like I don't think that's going to stick. But I guarantee you, if you say it might affect your sex life the rest of your life,
Then they're
that
going to
might
care.
actually go, I don't know if I want to take that, you know? And so
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty big one that we're not telling and people are not aware of, especially like you mentioned, kids and young adults. But the other one I'm super concerned with, and you just said it, elderly. And I was just in Scottsdale visiting a friend of mine, and the doctor kept calling her while I was there because her mom's in the nursing home, and wanted her to approve this drug, adding it to her like big list of drugs she was already taking. So I just happened to be there, and I'm like, she told me what the name of the drug was, and I go, why are they giving your mom a schizo or an antipsychotic? And I
Oh
go,
God.
why are they giving? I go, is your mom schizophrenic? And she goes, what? And so then I said, do you have a list of all your mom's meds? I'm just curious. So I went through it, and it was all generic. So first of all, I can't say a lot of the words like paroxetine. Like, tell me the name. Like, even if it's a generic, say that's Paxil. That's
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because people think branding because that's why it works, but they like to give us the generic. But you should always, so don't, when it's generic, that doesn't mean it's safe, right? Or you don't know what it is. So like I went in there, she didn't know what any of these were. And so I go, let's take the list. I'm like, I don't know what these are without, the brand. So then we started Googling them. I'm like, why is your mom on 3 antidepressants?
Holy smokes.
3 antidepressants, 2 antipsychotics. There was like a pain, a statin. And I'm like, she was on like literally 15 drugs. And I go, I'm curious, did they tell you that your mom was on 3 antidepressants? So she ended up having a call. And this is why exactly the conversation we're having about being our advocates, right? For our loved ones. She called and got a meeting with the director of the nursing home and wanted to hear, like, asked about all the meds. And she's like, I want to get her off these, right? All these, like, and she goes, why is she on 3? And this is what they said. Well, we believe that 3, she's only on a really low dose. 3 low
Oh my
dose is
God.
better than 1 high dose. And I'm like, I've never heard that. That's clearly, they're like playing a, like, what's when a guinea pig.
Russian roulette.
Yeah, Russian roulette, guinea pig.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. I'm like, wait, but who told, like, where's the evidence? who said that? Like they're just playing, they're playing games on your mom that we don't know. Like, does she really? I've never heard three low
But
dose.
isn't this absolutely, Kim, crazy? Like
It's
elderly
crazy.
are so over medicated. They just keep throwing medication at the elderly because it's almost like they're in God's waiting room. We'll
Yeah.
just make them comfortable. And I'm
Yeah.
infuriated about it. It makes me sick to my stomach.
Well, and if you start looking at all the new drugs that are coming out, a lot of the new ones are super uber expensive, and they also know, like I always say, go back to what my late husband told me, Kim, if you want to get to the bottom of anything, follow the money. Well, guess who are the big markets for money? Medicare and Medicaid. And so you look at the Medicaid, which are the lower income and the kids in foster care, you go look at all the meds that they're on. It's because it's natural monies that come in. And same with Medicare. Like the more people that you have, like that's money for and then you have all the insurance. I mean, it
Well, I
is
mean, if you think
nuts.
about big pharma, like there are so many people that have been trying to regulate big pharma. I mean, over the years, like you hear about it, right? But to take big pharma and regulate it and make it so that they're not advertising on our television. I read somewhere recently that the United States and Canada are one of the only countries, or two of the only countries rather, that
It's US,
advertise.
yep, it's US and New Zealand. Canada doesn't allow, although they do have, they don't have the official like ours, but it is only two in the whole
But
world.
that's interesting. So Canada doesn't even do it.
No, but I just had, so they can't advertise, but they can do things called like disease awareness, which is interesting because they'll promote a disease or it'll be like, but if you actually go and look who's behind it, anytime I see any disease ads, I'm like, well, that means there's a drug somewhere. Like they don't.
Hmm.
And so sure enough, so Canada does have, they allow that, but you just can't like list the name of like it's a branded name, but they might say, oh, it's binge eating disorder. And then because that was something. And so they can promote about binge eating and like how it's really dangerous for people. But then you have to go and like, and it'll say, binge eating disorder.com. And you go look at it and then you're like, oh, well, this is GSK, GlaxoSmithKline. So of course they've got a drug coming out. So I feel like even Canada, you know, you just got to be a little smarter too.
That's another question I have for you. Is like, what do you think about this world um, of reps, these drug reps, these pharmaceutical reps that are making $500,000 a year? And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Painkiller. Have you seen
Yeah.
that?
Yep. I know.
Unbelievable about the Sackler family.
Yep.
Um, and Oxycontin. And they knew what Oxycontin was doing. They
Yeah.
knew how dangerous it was. They didn't care.
No, and they were selling it and so this is what I call the spider web. They were using all of like I always, I haven't, maybe we can even put it into your notes or something.
Yeah,
I
explain the
have
spider web.
Yeah, so the spider web, I've been going to conferences all over the world for a long time because I like to travel, but I also learned that other countries talk about the harms and the ugly side and not in the US. And I was at one conference called Selling Sickness and it was in Amsterdam in 2010. And all the examples they were using were from about the marketing and the disease awareness and ghostwriting. Were all from the US. And I'm like, the examples, I'm like, where are the people from the US? Like, why aren't they here? And so what I started to do is I'm like, wait, this feels like the whole system is like a spider web that the doctor and the patient are trapped in the middle. And
Right.
everything, like if you own every aspect of it from the academic institutions, your med schools, to 50% now because it was during the AIDS crisis that the FDA was too slow at approving drugs. So they came up with the user fee, which is basically with every new drug coming into the FDA for review, they pay an application fee. And that application fee then ultimately now it's like over 50% of the FDA budget is paid by the drug companies. and industry. Well, who's the real customer? It seems like they're probably the customer. And so when you look at that and you look at the screening tools, like you saw it in the opioids, right? One of the screening tools that is for like antidepressants, it's called the PHQ-9 form, but a lot of times you fill it out at the doctor's office. It's the one that says, in the last 2 weeks, have you felt sad? Have you ate too much? And it's this questionnaire that they give you at the time of like your insurance, to fill it out. And that form, nobody looks at the bottom, but it says in tiny type, a generous donation by Pfizer Inc. and 3 key opinion leaders. And key opinion leaders are these people, doctors that have big reputations that the companies will then align with, but they're basically helping promote either a disease, and then of course the company has a product for it, or they're with the company with that they're getting paid to help promote this new
Well, let
drug.
me give you an example of not a drug, but of a valve. My mother, the doctor that did her surgery, that ultimately did what he did. Um, he is the largest. He makes the most money in the United States for these particular valves. He is paid over $300,000 a year just to use these Medtronic valves. So he is out all around the country pushing his minimally invasive valve repair replacement because he gets paid every time he uses one of Medtronic's valves. And I looked all that up. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
I bet you didn't know. So I bet you didn't know that at the time of your mom's surgery,
No, not a chance in hell did I know that.
right?
No.
But now it's interesting because I think you learned something that I think is something that people should actually look at, which is ask the question, go do your research. Like if you were to have that surgery again for your mom, I bet you would ask the question, or if you're
Well, the thing is, my mother needed repair, not a replacement. He decided to go and replace the valve. She had 2 valves to do, or 3 valves, I don't know, 2 to repair, and he decided so she wouldn't have to go back in to do them all at once. It was unheard of to do 3 at one time. She didn't need 3 done. He decided to replace one. That's when he couldn't see. He went to go replace it with a Medtronic. Sorry, but that I'm saying
yeah,
it the truth
no,
there.
yeah.
Valve, and had he just done one, repaired it, sternotomy, repaired it the way my aunt had it done, the way my cousin had it done, my mother would probably still be alive today. But he was a hot shot, and he decided to
Yeah.
go in and do something at an 81-year-old woman he never should have done. And yeah, it's just tragic. I mean, it's just an example of that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And
I mean, that's a prime, what you just described is part of like, that's a key opinion leader, or that's a or that's a doc that just gets a lot of money to promote a product, or the companies go out and intentionally, there's actually marketing companies that will go find doctors for companies so that they can be part of that they might be the hot shot, right? They might be the latest cardiologist that's out there promoting it.
yeah, it
And
even goes so far as like breast implants. I mean,
yeah,
that was a real thing. Breast implant, what do they call it? Disease.
yep,
Basically, some of these were faulty. They were causing all kinds of problem. Women were ending up having brain fog and all kinds of other problems in their body because these implants weren't safe. But yet there's pharmaceutical reps going out there selling these saline bags or these silicone bags. I mean, like that you're putting something foreign in your body. I mean,
yep.
how safe really is that at the end of the day?
I know, and that's the thing. Like when you start, I think these are the questions that instead of like what do I take, it's like who's making money off of this? Like
Mm.
who, like even this idea of, and of course I don't want to be this cynical because if I'm sick, I mean that's the thing. Like when we're in the hospital or something's happening, we want to be able to trust. But I have to say, because it's usually when you're like the weakest, right? and you're more willing to go, all right, well, just make me better. But you need
Hmm.
that person who is asking the questions when you can't, because that is the thing. Like when you're down and you just want to feel better, you need, like, you're going to probably be more, you're not going to be thinking about like, oh, tell me, did you make any money off this drug? You're going to be like, oh my
Yeah.
God, help me get out of this hospital or help me feel better. And so I think the questions that you're raising are really, really, really important, or just this topic, because somebody does need to advocate for you. And so I think we need to remember at the end of the day to still kind of take it back to, no one's going to still care more about you or your loved ones than you. And when we give our power away, we literally, and or if they're telling us, oh, it's good for you or take it, if something should happen and you're the percentage, the small percent, or maybe bigger because they've hidden
Yeah.
something, right? Who lives with it? They don't. Your doctor doesn't. The doctor that hurt your mom, like that killed your mom, that doctor doesn't live with the reality. You do. The
No,
doctor
that
that gave,
doctor I saw when I was back home in Ohio, I saw him driving around in his Mercedes, just music up. Like I'm like,
yeah, right.
it's a statistic. He won the one that got away.
But you know what? Statistics, and I'll tell you, this is where I learned this, and I keep this button by my, it says, we are not anecdotes, we matter.
Oh, I love that.
And this happened because we went to the FDA after Woody died, and I had one of the experts in the UK that was kind of the one behind pushing for the kids, and I had a couple other families who lost their loved one really quick. I mean, they were all hangings within a couple like short, like maybe a couple weeks after. And literally, the head guy of the FDA said, well, these are just anecdotes. He literally said, these are just anecdotes. And he goes, because we didn't see it in the double blinded, placebo controlled studies.
Wow.
And I remember looking, and I mean, literally, it was like, we're sitting there. And I thought for sure, I thought, this is how naive I was back then. I thought for sure they would be curious, like, and like when a plane goes down, the NTSB,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
FAA who approves the planes, right? And the NTSB investigates. I thought for sure they'd be like, oh, this is interesting. This guy got it for this. He's not depressed. And 5 weeks later, he hung himself, that they would be curious. Nope. Literally, with us sitting there, they're like,
Why
they're,
isn't there any investigative board that goes through, even hospital board, any kind of
yeah,
why isn't there any kind of investigation and to at least find out how this happened, why this happened, how you can correct it in the future, and so that we learn. The
yeah,
same thing happened with my mom's doctor. He didn't even care. He didn't
yeah.
even put it,
Like,
he didn't even want to know how it happened.
yep.
He
And
didn't know how it happened, he said.
yeah, because but wouldn't you be like, I would think, and again, this is the hard part, because I don't understand why you wouldn't be curious, but maybe it's because we're the ones that have lived with the experience, right? And they're not, and it's easier to like, oh, it's a small percent.
There's also great doctors, like you said, and great medicine. And there's things that obviously, if there weren't antibiotics, all of us probably wouldn't be here anymore because, antibiotics have saved so many lives. And there's
Yep.
so many great medicines. And I certainly, do like the medical profession in many ways. But like you said, it's advocating for yourself and advocating for your loved ones and really making sure we know what we're taking. We know what we're undertaking if we're going into a surgery. We know what minimally invasive means. Doesn't mean this is an easy walk in the park. This just means it's a smaller incision, which can also
Right.
present problems too.
This is where I go, that I have come to realize when I said it at the beginning, sometimes our greatest purposes choose us. I kind of feel like this was a mission that I was given, because the fact that newspaper, the front page of our newspaper that night, and the coroner asked about it, like it was kind of like, here you go, here's your clues. Because I think anytime anytime something happens and it's out of the blue and it makes no sense, you go in that investigative mode.
Yeah.
And we had two things handed to us that night. But when I moved out of my house, I'm not gonna lie, because Woody and I, Woody left me notes all the time when we both traveled. He left notes all the time. And I really thought, like, I'm like, come on, Wood, I know you took the biggest trip of your life and you didn't leave me a note. Like, and you left me notes all the time, like, help me understand. But I think in some ways this was the note, but I'll
This
never,
was the note.
I'll never get, I didn't get that completion. Like you didn't get that completion with your mom. So this is where I think that we have to be willing to push back. And I think that's the power of doing advocacy. And I think the power of a person's voice, where we do have power, but we don't think, somehow we have given it away. And I do believe that our voice matters, because and we should speak up.
Well, I think the world is lucky to have someone like you. Like, we're all lucky because even though you're an accidental advocate, you were meant to do this. And I think that the courage that it takes to do this is really important too. And if you ever need a partner in crime, like,
I know, I was going to
look
say,
me up.
I love, this is a great conversation. I love this.
Girl, I will go with you and I will march with you
Oh,
because
I
I
think
am
there's going to
so
be some
passionate about
things.
this.
I was going to say, I bet there's going to be some things in the next year to go out. It would be awesome.
I
And
will do anything you want with you. By the way, you should also do a TED Talk. I don't know if you do, but
I have talked, yes, I do need to do that. I've talked about wanting to do that too.
really does. Yeah, and I am so grateful to have you on, and I appreciate you being on and what you are doing. I mean, I am just in awe of it, and I know it wasn't something you meant to do in life, but it has been a calling for you, and maybe it's Woody up there saying, "Go," like make a change, and that's important in life, and there always takes people like you, and oftentimes it is through tragedy that we
Yeah.
somehow see the open window.
Unfortunately, I think that is what I've always seen, is like, I remember like the 9/11 widows, they're the ones that push for Congress to make change and have those hearings, or the mama bears, and there's a lot of people out there that, unfortunately, I think that's when people wake up, is when something happens and they feel inspired to take on something to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to somebody else, when it's something that could be fixed.
A very, very sharp and Terry.